Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.
Great to be with you.
Paris. I mean, Paris, what seemed shocking to the world, was it a surprise to you?
The particular event, of course, was a surprise, because had we been able to prevent it, had we had the information, the intelligence, then of course we would have focused all our efforts on doing that. But in a larger sense, unfortunately, it wasn't. And indeed, the very reason that it was so important for us to build this coalition of now 65 countries more than a year ago to combat ISIL was because, in the first instance, there was a horrific problem in Iraq and in Syria for the people living there, and in the immediate region, and particularly the states that were suffering as a result: Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, etc. But also because we saw that if this problem was not arrested as quickly as possible, it was likely to spread, and indeed ISIL had ambitions to attack not just in the region, but in Europe and in the United States and in places beyond. So in that sense, we understood from the beginning that this was part of their larger objective.
Their strategic goals, their own goals. I mean, did it change the way the United States looks at this, at the threat of ISIS?
Well, you know, we've built a comprehensive strategy over the last year. And I think President Obama addressed this in some detail in Turkey just a day ago. But that comprehensive strategy, he said, when we established it, was going to take time. It was going to be difficult. There were going to be setbacks, including the horrific setback that we saw in Paris. But it is the right approach. And what is it? It involves working on a whole series of fronts at the same time in a coordinated fashion. The most visible is what's happening on the ground in Iraq and in Syria, the military front. But that is not only not sufficient, it has to be backed with work that we're doing to stop the flow of foreign fighters, to cut off the financing, to deal with the narrative, to enhance cooperation among law enforcement and intelligence organizations in all of our countries. And all of that is happening.
But yet, in the year or so that the U.S. has been really more actively involved in with dealing with ISIS, the foreign fighters have increased. At the best, it's a stalemate. You move from 20,000 to 30,000 foreign fighters coming in. You've just escalated the airstrikes against the oil fields, so it's going to be a little bit of time before you see it. I guess, how does this fit into your...
Well, let's look at what's happened over the last year. Okay. Besides building a coalition of 65 countries, we've also, through that coalition, produced real results. So consider where we were a year ago, in Iraq, for example. When this all started, Baghdad was threatened. Erbil in the Kurdish region was threatened. ISIL had taken Tikrit. They'd taken the Mosul Dam. They were threatening to slaughter the Yazidis, and they were on the march throughout Iraq. Today, Baghdad is secure, Erbil is secure, Tikrit, 85% of the population is back. The Mosul Dam has been taken. The Iraqis, with our support, are moving on Ramadi. And of course, we had this major success in Sinjar, which was a critical line of communication linking Raqqa, their capital, so-called capital, in Syria, with Mosul in Iraq. And ISIL today controls 30 to 35% less territory than it did a year ago. So there's been significant progress in Iraq. But it's a challenge, and it remains a challenge. Anbar, which is a predominantly Sunni area, is a particular challenge because you have an Iraqi military that's comprised mostly of Shia operating in an area that's mostly Sunni. So we are strongly supporting the efforts of the Iraqi government to mobilize the tribes in that area to get into the fight. In Syria, which is even more complicated because we don't have the same kind of partner that we do in Iraq, even there, real progress. The border between Turkey and Syria, as a result of efforts made by groups on the ground with the strong support of the coalition, 85% of that border and the crossings have been taken back from ISIL over the last year. The remaining 15%, west of the Euphrates River, we're working with Turkey and others on a program to take that back. That's going to make it much more difficult for these foreign fighters to come in through Turkey into Syria and then on into Iraq as well. And pressure will begin to be exerted on Raqqa, the so-called capital of ISIL. Now, again, it takes time. It's hard to do, but it is moving forward. And why is this so important? Because one of the reasons ISIL has been effective in recruiting people is by projecting success and strength.
Right.
And what we are demonstrating is, no, it is not 10 feet tall. We've actually stopped its forward advance. We're pushing it back.
Okay.
We took out several significant leaders of the effort, including, we believe, the Jihadi John, the person in the beheading videos, the leader of ISIL in Libya. All of these are significant. But
is it true that's the first time that you've targeted the leader of ISIS?
oh no, we've actually been involved over the last year in focusing, and we've actually been able to deal with a number of leaders.
What about social media? I mean,
social media is a critical front in this, because the narrative that ISIL projects, it uses social media to advance that narrative.
And they've done it effectively.
And they've done it very effectively. They are very sophisticated and smart about it. But there too, we're seeing some shifts. Okay. When this started a year ago, they were so dominating the social media space that 70 to 80 to 90% even of what we were seeing in social media was in favor of ISIL.
Right.
That's been totally reversed. And now what you're seeing in the social media space is 80% or more of what's happening being against ISIL. But, and I should also point out, roughly, there's a very small number of extremely active social media actors for ISIL, maybe 1,000 to 1,500. 2,000
is the last thing that Google...
Yeah, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000.
Right.
And most of them are in Iraq, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. So we have to do more to try and squeeze their space. But here's what's so important. The voices that are advancing the counter-narrative, it's not very effective, frankly, when it's the United States or others. It's most important that the voices be those that resonate with vulnerable populations. And in particular, what we found is a number of people have gone to ISIL and then realized that what ISIL was selling was entirely false and wrong. And they became very disillusioned and they left. They're very powerful in terms of the voice that they bring to this in helping
the formers.
The formers.
Right.
And then the victims, too. Every single one of these mass murders and what we've just seen in Paris, these are individuals, these are people who had lives and families and friends and communities. And the more you can humanize these inhumane acts, that I think will resonate with people who may be susceptible to joining, to look at the destruction that is being wrought.
I bring you back to the U.S. policy on this. I mean, the night before the Paris attacks, President Obama said that he told ABC News it was contained. That seems to be a different paradigm from what you're describing now and what I've heard him describe at the CVE summit last February. What is the difference in that? I mean, of containment where it's political and you don't want to have boots on the ground necessarily, because versus this, it's got to be all out, build communities, build a coalition, which is what you've talked about. What's the difference? Why are these words different?
Well, the president's the one who's built this coalition and built this effort across all of these different lines of effort. That was a result of his leadership, of U.S. leadership.
But when he said it was contained...
So what he said specifically was that the ISIL advances in Iraq and in Syria have been contained and indeed pushed back. That's what the reference was to.
So it's very specific.
So it's specific to their actions on the ground in those countries. And as he said, that's very important for two reasons. First, because it's important in both of those countries in terms of protecting the populations. But it's also important, as we said a moment ago, because what attracts some people to ISIL is the sense that they're moving forward and taking territory in Iraq and Syria. So the fact that that effort has not only been contained but actually pushed back will take away from their attractiveness.
In terms of Southeast Asia, I mean, ISIL, again, we can talk about the different names, right? But they wanted to put a province in Southeast Asia. How do you assess the threat here today?
Well, I think there are two things going on. One is you have, in different parts of the world, some long existing groups that are trying to grab the ISIL banner because it seems to be successful, even though there's no actual connection. And similarly, there have been occasions when ISIL, or in a different sphere, Al-Qaeda before that, would sometimes take credit for an action by a particular group in a particular country, even though it wasn't directly involved. So we look very, very carefully to see if there are actual, real connections, guidance, support, and thus far, we haven't seen much of that here in this part of the world. But it's something we're extraordinarily vigilant about, because there's clearly an ambition to do that.
And is that even the right paradigm to look at it, given that lone wolves, if they're inspired by it and they carry out a bombing attack, is that the right paradigm? How would a counterterrorism, how would a government deal with this new threat?
Well, there are different things going on, and you're exactly right. There's the lone wolf phenomenon, where people who are inspired, for lack of a better word, take action into their own hands, but there's no actual connection, there's no actual support, guidance, planning. But then there are situations where, even though it may be a small group of individuals, there may be connections back to ISIL in Syria or in Iraq, and we need to be able to cut that off. But honestly, one of the challenges about this is that when you have even a very small group of people who are willing to murder innocent civilians and also kill themselves in the process, that poses a particular challenge.
And this is the last question I'll ask you on this before we move on. Did Paris trigger something? Did something change? Because the specter of central coordination, is that something that...
I think Paris triggered a absolute determination, not only on the part of the United States, but indeed of all of our partner countries and other countries that are not yet part of the coalition, an absolute determination to defeat this horrific threat. So if anything, it's further energized the effort. I think we've also seen extraordinary solidarity that's been expressed by countries around the world, because this is not a clash of civilizations. This is a contest between civilization and something that is trying to undermine it.
Let's talk about China. I mean, what Filipinos want to know is, how far will the United States go to help defend territory in the Philippines? The treaties don't say it necessarily, but...
Well, look, there are a couple of things going on. First of all, we have, of course, the concerns about China's actions in the South China Seas. And from the perspective of the United States, we don't take a position on any of the underlying claims. We're not a claimant ourselves. We don't take a position on the merits. But we have a very strong national interest in three basic principles. One is upholding freedom of navigation. Second is the need to resolve any of these differences peacefully. And third is to do it through international law and international norms that have been established for a long time and have been actually at the foundation of the success of so many countries in the Asia Pacific, including China.
Correct.
So that's what raises concern for us. More broadly, with China, we have worked very hard to do two things over the last few years. One is to deepen and broaden our areas of cooperation, and we've succeeded in doing that. We've worked well and hard with China on everything from climate change to Afghanistan, to advancing development in third countries. But at the same time, we're also very determined to deal directly and forthrightly with our differences. And again, our differences go to really the concerns in a few specific areas where China is acting in a way that ignores the established rules and norms. And one of those is the maritime area, and the other is cyberspace. And President Xi had a visit to the United States, a state visit, where those two subjects were important parts of the conversation, and where I think we made real progress.
So you're happy with where things have gone in these meetings?
Well, no, I'd say that I wouldn't want to qualify it as happy or anything like that. There is progress. There's a recognition, I think, on the part of our Chinese friends that some of their actions in cyberspace were a real concern for the United States, and similarly in the maritime area, again, we take no position on the merits of these differences. And what we would like to see happen is for all claimants, not just China, but all claimants, to freeze the actions that they've taken in terms of reclamation projects, construction on the reclamation projects, militarization. And indeed, President Xi, when he was in Washington, made a very important statement that China does not intend to militarize the Spratly outposts.
And yet it's been quite aggressive. Let me run to the economic part while I still have you. The global monetary architecture, according to Indonesia's trade minister, he says that he's a proponent of bringing the renminbi in. I mean, how does the United States look at that?
Well, look, what we've seen, first of all, I think the most important development recently in the architecture is TPP, and this is a major step forward, this agreement, because of course it represents right now, just with the original countries, roughly 40% of world GDP.
Right.
But even more important is that the standards it establishes in terms of protecting the environment, protecting workers, protecting intellectual property, creates a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. And that's exactly what we're seeking to achieve. So right now we're working, of course, to get approval in our own Congress, and the other countries that are in the original group are working to do the same thing. But it's our hope that this is something that over time will attract other participants. And it sets a foundation of the highest standards, not the lowest. That is the most significant development in the architecture of late.
And is the U.S. open to the renminbi coming in with the U.S. dollar?
Well, look, we have to see how the international economy develops, and ultimately, our economic presence and engagement in the Asia Pacific, in our judgment, and I believe in the judgment of most countries here, has been a source of stability and growth, and it's something clearly the countries want to see continue. At the same time, China has a strong, growing, important economy, and its success is good for everyone. It's good for us, it's good for countries in the region, indeed it's good for countries around the world. We're much better off if China succeeds and grows and strengthens than we are if it were to go in the opposite direction. So our only concern is that as China does that, it does it looking at the highest standards, not the lowest, and it does it within the framework of the institutions and laws and norms that have been established over the last 70 years, and that have been a tremendous benefit to China, not just to us and to other countries in the region.
But to go back to the core of that question is, Filipinos want to know, how far will the United States go for the Philippines?
Well, we have a strong commitment to the security of the Philippines. We have a very strong relationship. We also have obligations under our treaty. And for example, under Article 4 of that treaty, were either of our armed forces or planes or ships to come under attack, it would trigger our obligations under the treaty. So we take that commitment very seriously. I don't think anyone should for a second doubt the commitment or doubt the credibility of the United States.
This agreement hasn't actually been pushed through yet, right? EDCA is the acronym for it. I mean, do you have any doubts that the agreement will pull through?
Well, that's really a question for the Philippines, but the Supreme Court is reviewing it. We hear that there will be a decision in the weeks ahead, but that really is up to the Philippines. We look forward to it being approved by the court. Certainly, that's our strong hope, because it will allow us to deepen already strong cooperation in the security sphere.
And then just looking forward, both countries, the Philippines and the United States, will have elections next year. Pivotal for both of us. I guess, how do you see the Philippines, impact of these elections, and what will happen in the U.S.? I threw everything into that last question, so I know you find.
Well, look, obviously the people of the Philippines are the ones who have to decide on the political future of their
I guess I'm looking
country.
here for how the United States sees the Philippines right now, and then this transition of leadership.
So I guess I'd say two things. First, what we see is a relationship that, in our judgment at least, has never been stronger. And it's grounded in several things. It's grounded, of course, in a long history together, a lot of shared sacrifice, common purpose. It's also grounded in the fact that there are so many Filipino Americans and Filipinos in the United States, more and more Americans here in the Philippines. Those people-to-people ties are at the foundation and the heart of the relationship. But it also goes to governance and good policies. And I think we have great admiration for the leadership here in the Philippines. The economic stability and progress that's been achieved in recent years is the product of, we think, wise policy and also a lot of hard work. And I think there's a great legacy there that I know the successor to the president here, the successor to our president, will want to build on.
In the last, your elections, the U.S. elections, what potential impact, what's at stake for us in these elections? Because we're all watching it very closely.
Oh, you know, I think there's been actually a pretty consistent policy on the part of both parties to strongly support, first of all, the relationship between the United States and the Philippines, but also our engagement and leadership in the Asia-Pacific region. So my suspicion is that that won't change with the election in all likelihood, given the most likely people to become president. I think there'll be a real continuity because, again, it's profoundly in the interest of the United States. We've spent tremendous effort, time, energy on the so-called rebalance to the Asia-Pacific because we see the potential of this region in terms of our own interests as being extraordinary, and our effort and resources should really match that potential, and that's exactly what President Obama has worked so hard to do. I think anyone looking at it rationally from the perspective of our own interests and values would have to conclude it's the right approach and it should be continued.